So what adds the most value during the pre-construction process from the perspective of the project owner?
Well, you know, the owner's goal when he goes for a integrated project delivery method that gets the contractor on board early, his goal is very simple. He wants the initial budget to be protected throughout the design process. And he knows that if it's not managed, if that process isn't managed well, that at the end of the day it will be over the budget. And that's what he's looking for. It comes down to, you can talk about the collaboration and all the happy balloon things that a team creates, but really from the owner's perspective, it's money. He's not wanting to be in that position at the end of the design where he's a couple $1 million over the budget, and that's what he expects the contractor to be able to do during this process, is manage the design process.
Now, I know you prepared a couple of slides, in here to kind of demonstrate what happens in the evolution of the project, and so would you mind walking through those piece by piece here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, David. The first slide is, well, let me back up a bit. We'll keep this slide in play here. I'm going to tell you what most contractors do in this process, and it's the wrong way. And you talk to architects, they'll tell you they have good experiences and not so good experience with contractors who perform pre-construction type of services. But what happens is contractors so often go into a presentation room and they will say, well, we're going to give you an estimate at 30% complete of the design, 60% complete of the design, and 90% complete of the design, so you'll know where the cost is at all times. Well, if you're an owner, your antenna should go straight to the ceiling, because that is not pre-construction services, that is estimating services. And if you look at this pie chart, and this isn't a specific project, this is just kind of a general look. You take a project, the cost is all that area in the light blue. The electrical, the mechanical, plumbing, the structure, the foundations, the site and civil work, that's where the bulk of the money is. There's soft cost in the dark blue there, CM, architect's fees, attorneys, and all the soft costs that an owner has to deal with. And then in the green is the finishes. Well, the finishes are really the things people feel and touch in a project, the carpet, the lighting, the wall finishes, the exterior finishes. Everything you see at the end of a project that makes it a wonderful project is in that finish package. What happens is that if a contractor just estimates the project at 30% complete, oh, it'll probably be within the budget, and then it goes to 60% complete. Next slide. David, can you go to the next slide? So at 60% complete, the cost starts creeping up. And, of course, it's primarily because the architect has drawn a lot more is engineered, and there's a lot more in the plans, and the cost starts creeping up. Then so often in this business, at 90% complete, next slide, David, at 90% complete, the project's way over the budget. And what happens is the contractor comes in and says, hey, that's part of my pre-con services. He's beating his chest because, don't worry, he'll save the day by value engineering. Well, the problem is that value engineering at the late stages of design, you can't go back and attack the electrical, the mechanical, the structure, and the civil. You start cutting the finishes because it's easy. You just cut numbers in a specification. You cut the quality of the door hardware. You cut the quality of the doors. You cut the quality of the carpet. You start cutting that low-hanging fruit to get it back in the budget, thinking that's what pre-construction services is supposed to do. But truthfully, you have totally failed at pre-construction services if this is what you're doing at the late stages of the design process. What has to be done, indicated on the next slide, is you have to begin with the architect. And I tell my owners all the time, the fewer drawings, the better to get me engaged. Don't wait until the architect's down the road a ways to get me engaged, because it's hard to do anything. I want little or no drawings to begin with. And you start meeting with the architect and you start diving into the electrical work, the mechanical plumbing, all the MEP, the structures, the civil, the roofing. You dive into all of these things in detail, and you start doing your value engineering at this stage of the project, not at the end. You should be able to hold your beginning schematic budget, your estimate at the very beginning, within 3% plus or minus at 90% complete. And that's your job. And don't get into the finishes, because that's a nightmare to the owner and a nightmare to the architect, that you're cutting the quality of his building because you failed early in keeping this in a budget throughout the design process.
I think you did a great job of describing that there. So the magic, it really seems like, is to have an understanding from the owner what their priorities for the facility are. If their priorities are lighting, the audio, video. Look, I'm picking out the electrical scope items. Sorry, my background, my nature. You know, what's important? Is it the finishes, the millwork, and figuring out the priority of what's important. So as you're working back and forth with the design team and the contractor base, you can go figure out how to try and make all of that fit and make appropriate cuts. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, David, I'll give you a quick example. And it's so often the contractors, when they go through this process, they blame the cost going up because, well, the architect just added something. The key here is, let's say you have a hotel and you have a pool at the hotel. You're going to have a pool building. Well, at the very early schematic phase of the project, there's a square that's labeled pool building, but nothing in it, nothing to describe what's in there. As the design progresses, you start identifying equipment and putting that equipment in that room, and all of a sudden the architect says, whoa, my pool building isn't big enough. I've got to enlarge it. And he doesn't communicate with that to the contractor. If that is not happening, then the cost is going to go up and you won't even know it. So what's so critically important is that every detail such as that has to be identified early in the process, so that if I know I've got bigger square footage of that pool building, my job isn't to just identify the added cost. My job is to go find something to offset that added cost. I've got to go find someplace else in the building that I can reduce costs to cover that, because I've got to keep my schematic budget in tow to the final, and not just blame the architect on making the pool building bigger and it costs us more.